In this video, I'm going to take you through the process of downloading and installing Duik tools into After Effects and getting it running. I'm sure a lot of you guys already have this running on your system, so you can just skip through it if you aren't interested in that. And then we're going to take the two separate models, overlay them on top of each other, create some unique compositions, and start applying some IK to the arms and the legs.
Okay, so I've put together the profile character as well. So now we have a front 3/4 character, a profile character with all the pieces rigged up and ready to go. And I also rigged up this head really quickly. Not that there was really much to it, but he's all put together. Except his head actually needs to be parented to his neck. And this is something we'll deal with later. Now, what I want to do is, because we're focusing on a version that has as little to no coding as possible, I want to get right into actually creating the IK with the Duik Tools applet for After Effects. The first thing we're going to do is actually go and download it. I already have it installed on this computer, so you'll probably want to grab it. And the actual website is duduf.net. And I selected my English language, so that's this extension you're seeing here. But go to duduf.net and then you will get here. And basically you go down to After Effects and you want the Duik tools, or DUD, I don't know how to say this, DUFIK tools. And essentially you want to go to the download. Okay, I'm just going to select download here. There we go. And you want to grab the latest version. There are other versions as well, so you can pick which version is compatible with your version of After Effects. And you basically just download it. It's going to come in as a zip file. It's pretty much the same process if you have a Mac as well. It's quite a small file, so it should come in fairly quickly. Okay, so it's sitting in my downloads as a zip file, so I can just take a look at that. And what I can do is I'm going to extract to Duik, a little Duik folder here. All right, and so the files are all sitting there. They have a Duik icon, script, UI panels, and the README. I just select everything and just go into my C drive, program files. If you're on an older version of Windows and you're using 32-bit, you won't see this x86. I'm running 64 bits, Windows 7, Adobe, After Effects CS6, support files, and then you're going to go into scripts. And as you can see, I've already got mine in here, but essentially all you have to do is drag and drop this into these three files into scripts. And I'm just telling it to rewrite. Yes, and I'll just tell it to replace. But you probably won't get this if you've never installed it before. But essentially, all of the files it'll just update the script UI panel so that the information it needs is in there. And you just tell it to go ahead and merge the folders. It's not going to overwrite anything that's important unless you already have a version in there. Okay, so now what I'll be able to do is go to Window, and what you should see is a little duik.jsx. And when you click this, a little applet should open up, and you will have the IK tools right here, and you will also have some animation tools, interpolation tools, some objects and other things. Camera, some really great camera controls, calculator, a notes panel, and the basic settings. And you can check for an update at startup. So this is currently the latest version for me, but obviously that might be a little bit different depending on when you've been using this. And usually with this little window, instead of having it floating around, I usually dock it somewhere. I typically have, when I'm using a bigger screen setting, I typically have all my special functioners here. I'll actually just put it here for now so it doesn't eat up my project window. Okay, so now Duik is installed and ready to go, and we can start getting into rigging up some IK for this character. Okay, now that Duik's installed, we can start focusing on getting this character ready for IK. I just want to quickly overview what's going on with the profile puppet here. It's essentially the same as the 3/4 puppet. The only difference is the rocket engine and where it's placed, and there's more rocket pieces. If you look at this, I essentially have two-part engines on this guy. So if we isolate these, I actually have a couple of different engines. So I have a back engine and a front engine. And all I've really done is I've taken all the rocket elements and parented them to the cushion and the actual rocket. So these little engine A and B are actually linking. 2A links to 2B, and 2B links to the rocket itself. So if I pull this around, all these pieces go with it. But then each rocket engine is actually parented to the cushion itself, and this little fin is parented to the cushion, because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to animate that fin or who it should be stuck to, or if there is actually going to be two of them. I may make two of them, and if I want to do two of them, obviously all I have to do is duplicate it. And I'm just going to name this fin really quick. I don't know why it's just called side rocket. 02 fin. And then I can have two fins. I do intend to create sort of a dimensional use of this and to create a tool to create a slight three-dimensionality to this. Unfortunately, that's going to require a bit of coding, and I'm trying to avoid giving you the first version in avoiding all coding. So for now, it's going to be a very, very basic structure. All right, and essentially everything else is the same. All the parenting, all the joint positioning is pretty much intuitive. I guess the head's the only thing that's a little bit specific. And the head, I didn't position the actual joint where it would actually be, which is at the back of your skull, mostly because of the way I set up the rotation piece for the actual neck. So it's not going to rotate super realistically, but it does give some freedom, and I think it still looks pretty decent. That's about it on this guy here. Now, the next stage that I would like to do is line these two puppets up, because what eventually we're going to be doing is having both a side puppet and a front 3/4 puppet, and you could have a front puppet and so on, all interacting with each other and following each other around. And to do this, we need a couple of different compositions, one for the front, one for the side, one for the 3/4. In this situation, we're only going to do a side and a 3/4. And they need to be the exact same composition size, because what we'll be doing is tracking in the composition where the control points are that are driving the hands around. Now, this will require some coding, so this is not going to be part of the version without coding, but we'll get into very quickly with the version that has some coding. It'll be the first thing we talk about. Essentially, when you actually grab the wrist and you start moving it around, that wrist will also move on this character, and you'll have the ability to have an IK connection or not. So in order to do this, I need to position these two characters pretty much in the exact position I want them to correspond with each other. And then I need to reduce or modify the composition size however I need to, and be done with it now. I don't want to have to be doing that later. The first thing I'm going to do with that is let's grab the pelvis of the actual side character, the pelvis, and we need to find the one that is parented to nothing, which I believe is the belt. Okay, so there's the belt. And the belt is acting as our center of gravity for this character. Technically, the center of gravity for this character would be around here somewhere, because that's actually where the mass would be accumulated. So when the character's flying, pivoting on this axis isn't quite accurate. You'd be pivoting more up here, but we can set something up like that later if you want, or you'll be able to apply the concepts. And I've just noticed that I haven't parented one of the hands to the arm properly. So let's go down and find the side arm, right? And there's that hand, and it's also not green. And that should be parented to arm right 2. And hopefully that hand's, rotation point's in the right place. Yep, everything's good. Let's grab that belt again. Torso skirt. Belt center. There it is. I might actually give this a different color so that it really stands out. Let's try a fuchsia. It's a really nice bright color. So what I'm going to do is just drag this guy over top of this guy here, and I want to position it so that I imagine they're going to be quite similar. So I want them to be sort of centered on that character a little bit. Now what I've done here is, if you look at my actual list of layers, you can't see any of the 3/4 ones. It's just because I've turned off their little gopher heads here and then applied this right here. So you can just to add layers to that, you can click those and then click this off, and those layers won't show up in your working space anymore. This is a really handy feature because it really avoids the excess confusion that can start happening when you have many layers. Okay, so these guys are positioned properly. I guess I can position this head, which this is a head we're going to deal with later. The main thing is I want to make sure it's positioned relatively well. And if I just pull up my guidelines here, I want to make sure that the lines are roughly in the right place, that the neck is in the right place. And I mean, it's not perfect, but it'll be pretty close. It's good enough. Okay. Okay, and now what I can do is I've just turned off the hidey hole guide, so I've got tons and tons of layers. So I have to position this character so he's a little more centered into this composition. And so I'm going to grab both of their belts, their center points. So we need to find the 3/4 center on this guy. There we are. It's right there. 3Q belt center. I'm going to also make that a fuchsia color. Forgive me, my colors are a little bit all over the place. I think I'm kind of inventing this as I go to some degree. I don't have an exact formula that I've memorized on how to do these characters, but this process is definitely handy. I'm going to position this more centered. I'm also going to give myself a little bit more in the height department and the width. So I want to go maybe to 7,000. I really want to nail this scaling down. Whoops, I want to go 7,000 by 7,000 as early as possible. If you do have to go and rescale something, it can change the actual layer space relationship. And what that does is if you have a bunch of coding, a lot of the code is often based on the actual composition size, and that can screw it up because it changes the positioning of an object. Just by changing your composition size, you effectively change the position of the object in the composition. Then you lose any relationships that you've made. So it's really good to try and get that out of the way early and make the composition a little bit larger than you think you're going to need it. Okay, so I'm just going to put that head there for now because that's a head we're going to figure out later. That head will be embedded in both the 3/4 and side puppet. And also, I would like to have the ability to add extra hands down the road, but we're not going to worry about that for now. We're going to start with a really basic puppet. Let's start creating nested compositions of these characters. So we can open this up here, and I'm going to grab everything that has to do with the 3/4, and thankfully I've named things well and also separated the layers really well. I can just shift like that. I have all the pieces, and I can press Control-Shift-C. Better save first, just in case. And I will call this Rocket Randee. Actually, let's call it 3Q. We'll start with 3Q for 3/4. Rocket Randee. We'll just do that. Maybe that'll be good enough. And okay, so I have to open the composition. There we go. So now what I can do is just grab this layer around and make sure everything came with it properly. And I got that head in there, which is fine for now. So that's all done. There we go. And then now we can do the side Rocket Randee. Scrolling all the way to the bottom. Shift selecting at the very bottom here. Control-Shift-C. And we'll call this side Rocket Randee. There we go. So now we have two very, very complex compositions and a very simple composition. And we're going to just go into the 3/4 Rocket Randee here and just turn off this head for now. And maybe lock it. And I'm also going to select everything and turn off the little hidey hole guys. And then re-enable the hidey hole because I didn't turn it off on these top layers, and just put those away for now. So now we have Rocket Randee segmented. And let's go into the actual segmented guy here. And I want to make sure that we have the puppets specified. These are the puppet pieces, but I want to make that a little bit different. So I'm going to put a folder. We have the folder segmented pieces. I'm just going to put these in here. Okay. And this will just keep things a little bit tidier. This collar sweater flat, this could probably actually go, I don't think we use this composition at all. We could go in here, put it Rocket Randee layers. Okay. So really we want to work with just the 3/4 and the side. So now that we have these two compositions and we have a nice layer space set up to move the character around, looks like I can pretty much bend him in any position and he'll still fit in this project window. So now we can move to the next stage, which will be adding some inverse kinematics to this character. So we're in the 3/4 puppet, and I think the first thing we'll do to begin setting up the inverse kinematics is to start building controllers. The controllers are the things that you'll pull around to actually drive your IK. They're the IK handle. So what we're going to focus on right now is making a really simplistic rig based on the actual puppet pieces we have. So what I'll do is select each main part with these kind of characters. You're going to be using the ankles for controllers and the wrists. So the wrists are the hands, and then there'll be a controller at the pelvis, and then a controller at the neck or the head. So let's begin creating controllers. all you have to do is select the actual object you want to use as a controller, and the controller will be created at the actual anchor point of this object, which will be at the wrist here. So if you see this wrist, you can see the anchor point, and if I click controller, it automatically creates a little object, a null object called chand left 01. So it's controller left 01. It doesn't do anything at this stage, but it is the beginning of the rigging process. And I guess let's just do one really quick. So I'm going to scale this one up to 200. I want my controls, they're my handles essentially, to be pretty big because I want to be able to grab them really easily. And this is the essential of how it works. We've created one controller. We select the end of the chain. So if this was a tail, you select the tip of the tail. If it's a leg, you select the end of the chain, meaning either the foot or the hand, not the base. The base of the chain needs to be anchored and locked. We're looking at the part that's actually moving around. So we'll select the end hand, then the arm left 2, which is the forearm, and then arm left 1, which is the upper arm or the humerus. And then we'll select the hand left 1 controller. So you select the hand, the end of the chain, and you move up through the chain with the limbs, and you can only do three actual parts of an inverse kinematic chain, which is pretty standard. So you select the hand, the forearm, and then the upper arm, and then you select the controller. That is the rule with all of these, is you select the end of the chain, and then move up the chain, and then finally select the controller last. And then you press IK creation. And you can see that the arm flipped a little weird, and this is actually because the IK controller has flipped backwards, just because of the positioning of the anchor point. So all you have to do to remedy this is go in here and click this checkbox right there, and that actually reverses the default rotation angle. Now, this is handy down the road when you actually have a side puppet, or when you have another arm, like especially this arm, where, the opposite arm, where it could bend this way, or it could actually bend the opposite way. So it is a handy little thing to have. Great. And what you also will see is a duplicate of the hand has been made. So there's the original hand. If I pull this controller around, the hand actually stays locked to the arm. The hand that it created, it essentially turned this hand off, created a duplicate, is a hand that is actually orientated to always face in the direction of the controller. So if I rotate this controller, the hand rotates. If I don't, the hand stays put and the rest of the arm moves. This is really, really useful down the road. So we'll be leaving it like this. And I strongly recommend locking this hand here. That's one that just disappeared, so that you can't mess around with it. In fact, often after I'm finished doing a rig like this, is I will lock all of the pieces I'm not using anymore. So the hand controller will be my primary piece that I'll be using. So we'll go through and do this with the rest of the limbs. So let's do the other arm, and let's create a controller. And this will be the right hand. I can actually make this one blue so that it's fairly clear. Blue, and whoops. There we go. And so we've got the blue one, and I want to scale that up again to 200. Okay. And then again, we will select the end of the chain, which is the hand. Go way down here. And then select the forearm and then the upper arm. And then finally select the controller. So I'm just pressing Control and clicking here. And create IK. And that should work just fine. And remember, I already have these parented. You have to have them parented. If they're not parented, the actual IK generation won't know which one's connected to which. They need it. So currently, if you look at the geometry down here, the hand is parented. The original hand is parented to the arm, the forearm, and the forearm is parented to the upper arm. If that parenting is not there, it will give you an error. So again, let's lock off the invisible hand so that it's not visible anymore. Move this around, make sure it's working okay. Perfect. And now you can see that the flip is really useful because I can have the character like this or have the character like that. Really, really handy. Put that hand back where it was. And now what I'll also do is just lock the rest of these guys for now. Okay. All right, so now let's do the legs. And with the legs, we're going to start with the ankles. That's where the controller is going to be. So this will be our left controller, and I'm going to scale this up. Okay, let's put this to 200. Okay, and we'll leave this one red. Actually, we're going to start at the ankle, select the calf, and then select the femur or the upper leg. And then finally, the controller. Shift select the controller, press IK creation. There's a little bit of a weird thing that happened there. The leg moved a little bit, even though it's orientated properly. I'm not sure why this is happening exactly for this leg. If this happens to you, one thing that you can do to avoid this is try rotating the object a little bit so that it's not orientated exactly the way that it was, because sometimes the orientation of the objects can cause problems with the way it's solved, because it's actually solving it based on where the joints are configured. So if this joint is configured in front of another, it can cause some weird angling. So I'm just trying to position them in a little bit more of a friendly placing, and we'll see if it actually works. It could be because his knee is almost hyperextended backwards a little. So I'll just adjust this. Don't worry about adjusting things because the character is going to move all over the place anyway, and you basically want to try to get it to solve properly. Okay, so we've done that adjustment. I'm going to save really quickly. And let's just make sure that controller is actually being moved. So what we can do is we can actually just delete it and get the program to make a new one. There we go. We have a new controller. We'll just scale that up to 200%. And again, we'll start with the ankle, the lower part of the leg, the upper part of the leg, and then finally select the controller and then IK creation. And that actually worked a lot better. There was no weird flip. Nothing strange seemed to happen. And the leg is working perfectly, except for that toe. Now, what's happening with the toe is, once again, the program's created a goal object, so that if we turn this goal object off, we can see that the leg is orientating to the calf. The goal object is, obviously, it's orientating to the actual control object here. So let's turn this guy back on. So it's orientating to the control object. We want our toe to follow that control object. So let's just turn this goal off, lock it, grab the toe, and then just parent the toe to the goal. And then this will keep the toe aligned. No problem. Pretty easy, right? Okay, so the next one, let's do the other ankle. Create a controller. A controller will be created automatically up at the top here. And I'm just going to color that one blue. There we go. Blue. And this one I forgot to rename. So actually, let's just undo this. Let's get rid of this controller. I want to rename this. So I forgot to rename my right leg. So right now I just have it boot 1, 2, 3. I want to name this ankle because I want things to be a little bit clearer now that everything's been put in place. Ankle, right, call it 0, 1. And then I want to grab this one and then make this toe. Instead of boot, I want this to be toe. Toe, right, 0, 1. There we go. Whoops, wrong toe. There we go. Just renamed those. So now I have a toe and an ankle, and then the boot is just the top of the boot. So it just makes it a little bit clearer for me with the way I'm working. You don't have to do this. So again, select the ankle. Let's create our controller object. I'm going to just press S on that, scale it up. Okay, so we're going to select the ankle first there. And then we will select leg 2, which is the lower part of the leg, and then leg 1, which is the upper part of the leg in this particular situation. Scroll up, and then finally select the controller and IK creation. Nothing seemed to flip weird, so I think we're in a pretty good spot. Let's try moving this around a little bit. Okay, and once again, that toes come off. That means we need to reparent it to the actual goal object that was created. So that goal object is right there. Just lock this one down and grab that toe and just parent it to the actual goal object. And there we go. No problem. It seems to be working really well. Go to save. Okay, a lot of what we're going to do next is mostly in parenting. And this puppet is actually nearly done. If we take a look at the actual belt center and move the center around, you'll see that the puppet is responding with inverse kinematics and everything seems to, in a way, is working. Now we just really have to work on the parenting structure to make this function.
In the next lesson, I'm going to go through the process of parenting and rigging up the rest of Rocket Randee's core. And we'll also go through setting up some control objects that we can use to drive his core rotations instead of actually using his geometry or actual layers that we created in Photoshop. In the last step, what we'll do is fix the pelvis one more time, which still isn't quite working when rotated in certain angles. By the end of the next lesson, we should have an overall working 3/4 Rocket Randee puppet without any code. If you like what e.d.Films is doing and want to stay up to date on the latest developments and tutorials, please show your support by liking us on Facebook.